How's it going, everybody? This is Chris with Willis Family Reptiles, and this is going to be the first video in my series, Your Very First Ball Python. Now, in this series, I'm going to go over a bunch of different things regarding deciding if you're going to get a ball python, knowing what you need, and actually choosing your ball python, and more stuff. But this video particularly, I decided to break it up into many different parts. So this particular video is going to be about things to consider first when deciding if a ball python is going to be a good choice for you. So the first thing I want to point out is that I'm sure a lot of y'all have heard, read, or seen a video where somebody has said that ball pythons make excellent pets even for the beginner pet owner, the novice, pet owner, first-time snake owner, and that they're great for children as well. The point I want to make here is that yes, that is absolutely true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are the ideal best pick for children or for the novice, pet owner or anything like that. They can be great for people that fall into this category simply because of the fact that they are extremely docile. They are not too big. They are not too small. They are, easy to care for. They're a low maintenance animal, which is great. But their ease of care can come with problems as well. So first off, I want to let y'all know that they require stability right off bat. If your schedule is very up and down, your finances are very up and down, anything like that, you may want to take into account if you're going to be able to set aside time specifically for the snake as far as, being able to be stable in routine work. First off, you're going to want to be able to dedicate a little bit of time each day, if not at least every other day, to go in and do basic care, which is basically going to be your spot cleaning and watering. You want to be able to every day go in to your snake's tank, your ball python's tank, and pick out any debris and give them fresh, clean water. That's going to be your everyday to every other day standard care. They normally eat once a week. Really kind of varies. Some people, get by with once every 2 weeks. Actually, juveniles need to eat more often. Juveniles are going to be eating about once every 5 days. On top of that, you want to have 1 day a week that you're really going through and doing a little bit more of a cleaning than just the standard spot cleaning. If you're using any kind of bedding like kitchen towels, you want to change that out weekly. If you're using substrate such as aspen bedding, forest floor, Reptile, anything like that, you're going to want to go through weekly, make sure there's no signs of any kind of mildew, make sure that the bedding is, holding its humidity like it's supposed to, check for any fecal matter or urates that you might have missed. Clean the water dish if you're not using a disposable one. Refilling it and giving them some fresh water every day to every other day is great, but at least once a week you want to be actually taking the water dish out, giving it a good clean, and refilling it and putting it back in there. And just overall checking their and then once a month or so, you want to go through, change out their bedding, the substrate. Even if what they're using isn't molding up or nothing like that, point is, you're going to want to go in and disinfect the tank. I use a simple mixture for disinfecting. I actually use Lysol, heavily diluted Lysol, and it works fine. Haven't had any problems with the snakes. Some people buy specific disinfectants. Some people use a 1-to-9 mixed bleach water. It's up to you what you use. Just make sure everything's been cleaned out, wiped out, and aired out before you ever put your reptile back in. The monthly things are also a great chance to really, really look through and see if there's any signs of any other problems. Some of the other problematic issues I want to mention with them is feeding, for starters. Not only do they require the stability of a regular feeding, but you also have to know a little bit about the snake and what they should be eating, especially size-wise particularly. And you have to know that sometimes they'll go on feeding strikes. They can go anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months without eating. And for the novice or the child, this can be worrisome. Ball pythons can have great feeding responses, then just one day not want to eat. So you have to keep that in mind, as well as have an idea of what you're going to do if they don't eat. A lot of pet shops won't take back a feeder rodent that's left at the store. They don't want to take it back and sell it to somebody else, and then there'd be an issue. You have other options too, though. But I mean, you got things like, are you going to keep it as a pet? Are you going to keep it and try again next week? If you're going to keep a hold of it and just keep trying to feed it each week, the rat's going to grow. If your snake's not eating, it's not growing. So you got to make sure it doesn't get out of the realm of, the size range that snake can handle eating. Another thing is that they require somewhat specific heat and humidity ranges within their environment, their enclosure, husbandry, whatever you want to call it. So you need to be able to not only give them the proper hot spot and cold spot, you want to also know, how to set it up properly. Ball pythons, the best thing you can do for them is have belly heat, meaning ground level heat coming from the bottom. But you have to look at, how are you going to heat them? You also want to make sure that you have the proper humidity. A lot of problems can come around from not having the right heat and humidity. Everything from something as simple as a bad shed to an RI, so they can have, the effect can range on them from not so serious, let's try and fix it, to a little more serious, you're going to have to go to a vet. And speaking of a vet, that's going to be the next thing you really want to know. You want to know where the vets are that you can take them to. Not all vets will treat snakes. Some vets will be willing to treat them, but you probably don't want handling your pet. Also, it can be a bit more pricey getting your snake treated at a vet. So it's good to have a little bit of knowledge about the snake and to be able to recognize symptoms. Because sometimes if you catch things early enough, minor adjustments can be used to fix the problem. A prime example of this is respiratory infections are somewhat of a common issue with ball pythons. I learned in the past that if you catch the early symptoms, raising the temperature some can actually clear it up if it's early enough. If not, you're going to go to the vet and you're going to have to drop some money on them and get the proper treatment, whether it be a breathing treatment, the shots, whatever it's going to be. Another thing that I'll note about children is that children require supervision, and I'm sure most people are sitting back watching this like, well, no brainer, but believe it or not, there are people out there who let their kids have a ball python and the kid doesn't know what it's doing, it's dangling a snake in front of it and not knowing the proper way to feed it, it gets its hand bitten by mistake. But when it comes to feeding and handling snakes, I really think that a child should be supervised at least until they're the age of 10. Now there are circumstances where the kid has experience or very mature kid has an understanding and does right. I understand that. But the parents need to supervise the child and make sure that they know what they're doing before they say you're good to go on your own. The next thing is setting up the cage and occasionally monitoring and checking on the heat and humidity levels, making sure everything stays good. You should really supervise your child during these things up until the age of 15. Because, a kid might be comfortable with feeding the pet, knowing how to feed it correctly. He might be okay at handling it, taking it out the tank and handling it by itself. But, does the kid know to check the heat and humidity levels regularly? Does he know to mist the cage regularly? If he does, great. What if something's off? What if, the humidity's drastically off and he's not thinking about the weather change? We just went from summer to winter and maybe he missed the cage and it's like, brings it to the perfect humidity levels. But then an hour later, he's sitting there thinking he has to douse the whole thing again. When simple little things like if they're in a tank, which is the most common issue with humidity, is the vented tops, the humidity leaving. Sometimes it's something as simple as a sheet of plastic or a plastic lid can be put up there to help keep humidity in. And kids might not have the knowledge to go out and research this information. On top of that, they might not even think about it at all. Especially with kids nowadays getting distracted by all kinds of things, whether it be friends, video games, just being too busy with homework. It could be a number of things. So definitely make sure that you supervise your children at least to the age of 10, if not 15. That being said, you also want to keep in mind what kind of husbandry needs your snake's going to need. You need to decide what kind of enclosure you're going to keep him in. Know the benefits and the negatives about using that kind of enclosure system, whether it be plastic, glass, wooden. Are you going to put them in a rack system or are you going to have them in what? Know the benefits of it, know the negativities about it, and do some research behind that. Know the lifespan of the animal. Ball pythons can live 30 years or longer, and some people get a snake not realizing that, and they don't realize how much of a commitment it is. It's not an animal that dies in 3 to 5 years. You really need to know everything about the animal. Do your research. Don't expect that you're going to go and buy this snake that's itty bitty and it's going to stay itty bitty, or think that it's going to be as big as a boa constrictor and you're going to have this big old badass snake that's huge. No. Ball pythons on average range from 3 to 5 feet, and I mean, I don't have any full-grown ball pythons right now. My females are a bit more moody to be touched. Males don't get as big as females, but this here is a subadult male ball python, and he's about half the size he'll get. To a female, he's about 1/3 the size he'll get in comparison, or 1/3 the size a female will get. Come on, back on in. He's fighting me a little. Okay. Also know the diet of the animals. Ball pythons eat mice and rats primarily. You need to really do your research and decide if you're going to try and feed frozen thawed. What can be the problems with trying to feed frozen thawed, as not all ball pythons take to them very well. If you're going to feed live, look at the risks behind feeding live. You always have the option of buying live and pre-killing, but some people can't stomach that. Killing a rat, whether you're euthanizing them using CO2 or just grabbing by the tail and swinging them against something hard. Some people can't stand that. Some people can't stand watching the snake kill something that's already alive, and they refuse to feed anything but pre-killed, frozen, thawed rodents, but the snake doesn't want them. Another thing to keep in mind is that the snakes will imprint on their feed. Not always, but they can, and that's the important thing. And you need to know what that means and how to avoid a snake imprinting on a food source that you might have gotten during a specialty event, such as a reptile expo, but then turn around and can't get locally there and after. You also want to know your state laws, the local city laws if they have any pertaining to it, and the rules of your neighborhood, as there are certain areas that you may live that can restrict what you're allowed to have. I went to move into an apartment complex one time. Everything was legal in the state, and I hadn't even thought about, an apartment complex telling me I can't have one. I figured if nothing else, it sits in an aquarium, it's not going to tear up the carpet or piss everywhere like you might have to worry about with a cat and a dog. So I figured, it shouldn't be a problem. I turned around and found out I couldn't have a snake there. They wouldn't even let me sign a lease because of the fact that I was asking them about it and that I told them I had snakes. Regardless of the fact that maybe I was willing to get rid of the snakes, from the point they found out that I had snakes at the time, they weren't even willing to work with me and let me get on the lease at all. Other than that, that's really a lot of the biggest negative things that I see people overlooking when it comes to deciding on whether or not a ball python is right for them. If you're able to work around all these things, you're allowed to have them in your state. You don't mind feeding live or pre-killed. In fact, you look forward to it maybe. Please don't buy a snake for just the coolness factor of watching it eat. It'll die off within a year, and then you're going to be stuck with another 29 years with the snake. Don't get a snake just because you want to see it eat. But yeah, say you're fine with the feeding. You've looked it up. You know the information of where the vets are locally. You know what kind of resources you need and everything like that. That's all great. I trust me, I'm not trying to deter you. I think the ball pythons are excellent snakes. They are a little bit more complicated than people make them sound, however. They are easy to care for once you get everything set up correctly. But they require monitoring. They require working with them, because if you're not handling them at least once a week, they'll get in the habit of not being handled and they won't want to be handled. So, really, that's just about all the negatives. If you're fine with everything that I've spoken about in this video, then there's a good chance a ball python will be the right snake for you. And your next thing to think about is, what kind do you want? What's available in your area? Maybe you're willing to buy outside of your area. Reptiles get shipped all the time. Are you going to buy from a breeder, local pet store? Do you want just a plain normal ball python, or do you want a cool morph? You know, do you want something with an interesting color or interesting pattern on it? You know, that's the next step, is to think about stuff like that. But, well, I can't say that's the next step. There are more things to think about, but that's just some stuff to start considering also, if you're honestly into it. On my next video, I'm going to be going over some of the pros and the cons to owning a ball python. So while I've covered a lot of stuff to just consider when thinking if it's the right snake for you, I'll be talking about how some of these negative factors can be a positive, or how some of them are more of a negative, and I might touch a little bit more in detail on some of them. After that, I'll start the video after that, I'll be covering resources. Thank you very much. Y'all have a great day. Please like, subscribe if you'd like to follow me, and feel free to leave any comments, questions, things you'd like to hear, things you'd like to know, any recommendations, especially recommendations for videos that y'all want to see. Just let me know. Y'all have an awesome day.